Holy cow, the government actually got off their butts and sued someone. Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here and you happen to really like this video, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell notification for notifications of, well, more videos like this one, or maybe not like this one. It kind of depends what I feel like talking about today. So anyway, I have been talking on my channel quite extensively and ad nauseum. I actually think I've annoyed some of my viewers. I've talked about this so much, how much the big tech companies have monopolies. And they do. They absolutely have monopolies. I'm sorry. But when you have single sites that control like more than 25% of the market, I think you're a monopoly. And in many of these cases, like that's a personal preference. I know the official standard is like 30%. I think it's 25, just because I'm picky that way. But most of these sites actually have more than 50%. And Google is no exception. Google is the #1 visited website in the world, and apparently some over 75% of internet searches are done using Google through a combination of people going to the website and just simply searching through the Chrome browser. Never mind, the Android devices have search through Google, so that means Google is pretty darn, big. Well, here's the thing. The government has finally got off their butts and they are suing Google. And this is an opinion piece. This isn't a news article, but I do want to read it and kind of share my thoughts because my whole thoughts is about stinking time. Now, do it for Amazon, but, Amazon's a bigger fish to fry. Well, anyway, this is from Shira Ovid. I'm sorry if I pronounced that name correctly. And it says, the U.S. government sued Google on Tuesday, claiming that the company is an illegal monopoly. My colleague called it the government's most significant legal challenge to a tech company's market power in a generation, and I agree. I'm actually old enough to remember the Microsoft antitrust lawsuit, whereas they were basically sued for antitrust infringement on two fronts. First of all, they put Internet Explorer on the computer for free. And you used to have to buy internet browsers, like Netscape and things like that. Does anyone remember Netscape? You had to buy a Netscape browser, and here was Microsoft giving it away for free, totally undercutting the market. And then, of course, programming it in a way that certain websites wouldn't work unless they were doing business with Microsoft. So, I remember that. Anyway, I think this is the first time that the government has sued a big tech company in this way since then. So anyway, the legal case is going to be loud, confusing, and will most likely drag on for years, which means years of content from moi. More confusing lawsuits against Google from U.S. states are probably coming too. What will be most important to remember are the big questions at the heart of this. Does Google break the rules to stay on top? And if so, does that hurt all of us? Well, the first one, I have to be perfectly frank, I don't know. I don't know if Google actually breaks the rules. I mean, I think they do some very underhanded things, but it might all be within, legal methods. Now, does it hurt all of us? Oh, absolutely it hurts us all. You saw like the story where the big tech companies, including Google, were trying to censor that story about Hunter Biden. I don't want to get into politics here. I'm not going to tell you who I voted for, but I will say big tech should not be suppressing stories like that. That was a legitimate report, and they wanted to cover it up. So yes, when big tech controls things, it hurts us all. So anyway, let's continue this. So yes, this is about politics and legal minutia. But ultimately, this case boils down to whether the technology that we use could be better and whether the American economy could be more fair. The answer to both those is yes, absolutely. And through all this drama, I have a lingering question. Is the government suing Google because the government itself wasn't doing its job? That's actually a pretty good question. I would actually argue that the government isn't doing its job in a lot of areas. I mean, shoot, we still don't have a second stimulus package right now, and that thing was supposed to come in, July, August. I mean, it's been a while coming, but no one can agree on anything. But yeah, the government wasn't doing their job with Google. They're also not doing their job with Amazon. They're also not doing their job with Apple. They kind of did their job with Facebook, but didn't do much beyond asking Mark Zuckerberg, does your site have a conservative bias and things like that. Anyway, all the activity that the Justice Department now says is evidence of Google maintaining an illegal monopoly over search and search advertising has been known for years and could possibly have led to a crackdown by agencies like the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and the Justice Department. Yeah, this information has been around for years. It's actually kind of been an open secret, like, hey, we got a monopoly, or at the very least an oligopoly, and we're not shy about saying so, and we know you're not going to do anything about it. Because bite us, we're Google. Those agencies are responsible for keeping watch on companies for signs of potentially abusive behavior. And yet, under both Democrat and Republican presidents in recent years, which Donald Trump, by the way, vowed to break up the big tech and has clearly done a very lousy job doing so, Google faced few substantive government enforcement actions for anything it did that made the company stronger and harder to unseat. If you let your kid act up again and again without consequences, should you be surprised that it keeps happening? No, you should not. In Tuesday's lawsuit, the Justice Department accused Google of shutting out rivals through tactics like paying phone companies and others to ensure that Google's web search engine has a prominent position on Android smartphones and on iPhones. Now, it's interesting that they bring up the iPhones because the reason Android is so prevalent on smartphones is because they usually license the operating system for a much, much smaller fee, with the understanding that Google products will be prominently displayed. Every phone you buy, the company you buy from has their own app store, but it's usually buried underneath in the All Apps tab, while the Google stuff is prominently on the front. In fact, the search bar is a Google search bar on my Android phone, and I didn't even set that up. It was just there. I don't know about the iPhone, though, because iPhone has its own operating system. This behavior, the government lawsuit said, holds back competition that could make better products for us all. I actually believe that's true because, here's the thing. I actually used to own a Windows phone, and I always thought the Windows phones were very nice. I thought they were much nicer than the other two, but, they really just, it was too late. These two companies have monopolies on everything, so it was very, very tough for them to break in. But this activity hasn't been a hush-hush conspiracy cooked up in underground bunkers at Google headquarters. We've known for years that Google pays Apple billions of dollars each year to make sure its search engine is the one that people encounter on their iPhones and in the Safari web browser. I did not know it was part of the Safari web browser because I don't use Apple products, even though I actually have quite a few shares in Apple stock. It's not a secret that Google had contracts with phone companies that require them to include Google apps on smartphones and make its search engine practically inescapable. The European Union's antitrust regulators fined Google over similar tactics in 2018. The EU required changes to Google's behavior, although some competitors have said they are ineffective. Reading the U.S. government's lawsuit, I was mostly left wondering why it's happening now. Well, it might be happening now partially because I think the suppression of the Hunter Biden story did spook people. Because here's the thing. I mean, yeah, I'm sure the Democrats are really happy that a story that could make Joe Biden and his family look bad is getting suppressed. But we're really, really close to the election, and this is fresh now. And they expect Joe Biden to win. And if Biden wins, well, then they might suppress a story that would help him get reelected the next thing. Who knows? The bottom line is, this is ripe for abuse, no matter what side of the political item you're on. Almost all the substantive allegations against Google abusing its power could have been made and were years ago. The EU case, which started in 2015, dredged up very similar facts. Novelty is not required to prove that Google is an illegal monopoly. It's really not, of course. But still, the lawsuit is treading on familiar ground. Why did it take so long? And again, could the FTC or the Justice Department have stopped in to ask hard questions about this behavior before now? Yes, and they can still step in for other companies now, which they're still a decade too late to ask. Would that have slowed Google and prevented the need for a big bang and risky lawsuit to try and change the way the company does? Change what the company does. Google said on Tuesday that the government's lawsuit is deeply flawed and that people use its online services because they choose to. Well, not me. I actually use Bing specifically to avoid Google for this reason. There are, to be sure, complex legal questions involved here. The government can't just declare that Google stopped doing stuff like this just because it makes the company stronger. But I do wonder if more effective oversight by every corner of the government in the last decade would have done with less fuss what this antitrust lawsuit is trying to do. Kept Google from tilting the game to its advantage. Of course they could have. But one of the problems is that all of these senators and stuff, they use Google products, and it makes their life so convenient. And of course, Google lobbies and spends probably billions of dollars doing so. So it just might be, hey, look, I'll take it later rather than never, but we definitely got started on this way too late, and it's going to be much, much harder. Now, what's the final, here's the final paragraph. The FTC urged Google and others to make it more clear when people were seeing web search results rather than paid links. Like this happened in 2013. What happened since that warning in 2013? Not very much. If anything, it's gotten even more difficult to tell Google's ads from everything else. That's one small example, and that activity wasn't highlighted in the Justice Department lawsuit against Google. But it shows that big companies, if their behavior is unchecked, will continue to test the limits of their powers. They absolutely will. Now, my big disappointment with this story for the day is that this is Google, not Amazon. I think Amazon's way more dangerous. But that said, Google is probably the second most dangerous when you get down to it, and so I do agree with this in principle. I do believe that they are a monopoly. I believe they are colluding. I believe all the tech companies collude. And I think if a lawsuit like this goes forward and it goes to discovery, we might actually start really unraveling just how much collusion there is in the tech industry. And then I think the government's going to have to go after more than just Google. They might have to go after everyone at this point. You name it. Twitter, PayPal, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple. Interestingly, this did not hurt the stocks. The stocks went up because investors just kind of shrugged off. And I think that's actually telling because it shows that the investors are not entirely convinced that a lawsuit would stick at this point. And as a result, they're not concerned about it at all. And as Shira pointed out, this will take years. Like, I might actually be 40-something by the time this gets resolved. That's a scary, scary thought. But, hey, again, you gotta start somewhere. Anyway, that's my opinion. I think this is a good thing. But what about you? Do you think this is a good thing that Google's being sued? Or do you disagree with the government? Do you think that, no, they're not doing antitrust stuff. They're not monopoly. Shut up. I'd love to know. Don't tell me literally to shut up. I'd like to hear, like, a actual reason. But, whatever that reason is, comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.